We're obviously really glad to be here. Will and I are going to stay seated just because we're going to be going back and forth on slides. We want to get through this. We only have 20 minutes, so we're going to provide some brief context of some of the work we're doing together and some of the work we're seeing at Odometry with some other clients to try to give you a peek into some of the results that we're seeing and how cross-channel attribution can help improve results. And then hopefully leave time for questions should you guys have any. So the first thing we really like to talk about is just the difference between simple versus advanced attribution, and talking mainly about digital channels. Simple attribution is when you're leveraging some sort of predetermined rule or weights in how you allocate credit. Current last event or last click attribution is a version of simple attribution. We decide ahead of time to allocate all the credit to the last event clicked or viewed. But in industries, especially like automotive, where the purchase consideration cycle is long, that's not the best way to measure results. You want to be able to measure results across the funnel of marketing activities so you adequately allocate credit. And other simple attribution approaches could be just deciding to evenly allocate credit or use some sort of ad hoc tools where you give a certain amount of credit automatically to the first ad someone might see, a certain amount to the last ad seen, and then allocate everything in between based on a flat average. Our approach at Odometry is to actually use the data, and that distinction we call advanced attribution, which is letting the data tell you specifically, using advanced heuristics and a probabilistic model, tell you exactly what's driving performance, so that you kind of see through the fog and opaqueness of your digital results to understand what's really driving bottom line performance. And so I'm going to hand it over to Will to talk a little bit about what we've done with Initiative.
Thanks, Paul. So there won't be any difficult mathematics, I promise. It's 9:30, we all realize that, and there were probably a few beverages consumed last night. But let's talk about a few of the marketing challenges that we have to overcome from an attribution standpoint within the automotive sector. Of course, we're further from the purchase than other marketing realms, DR, things like that. They're much more trackable. We have this offline purchase issue that we have to tie the data back to. Because we don't have that, there's some solutions that have been talked about over the last couple of days, how to do some data matches, and those are interesting and often very expensive. So we ultimately use a lot of times the website traffic or actions on the website that we would consider KPIs or proxies for success. The other thing we have to consider is that's a high consumer involvement category. And as we've heard also through the conference, with the proliferation of various social platforms, basically we're taking that consumer and we're expanding that sphere of influence that consumer has, and we need to take into account multiple touch points beyond just display and search. We need to start to look at how are we going to incorporate social aspects into this process. And then ultimately, we are dealing with a much longer latency in terms of the beginning of the research to the end and making that decision. And because of that window, we need to look back as far as physically possible. And as evidenced by advanced attribution, we can start to do that. So what we've been doing is looking at, and I should probably take a step back. At the beginning of this conference, Ariane Walker talked about the AIU rate is now at a steady 80%. And so what that basically means is the automotive purchase process is highly involved from a digital perspective. And so digital planning is core. The last click measurement is currently inadequate. And if I can get a quick poll of hands, don't be afraid. How many are currently using last click or last view through methodologies to measure some success with their campaigns? Show of hands. There's a few out there. And I think what's really interesting and intriguing about some of these new efforts that are taking place is we can let that data speak for itself. We can get greater visibility into the window, and we feel like generating the evidence empirically is the best way to do that, and giving that fractional credit to every touch point upstream from that last view, that last click is the appropriate method for measurement. Moving on to measuring the true effect of our online efforts in driving KPIs, we need to understand not only how are the touch points influencing, but how are the ad size, how is the creative influencing the consumer, how's the frequency across the number of touch points, not just within one that you may have on the plan, but how do you actually take into account the multiple touch point approach with regards to frequency? Ultimately, what we wanted to do when we went out and RFP'd the space was to challenge the industry and say, it's great to understand the full attribution picture, but it's even more important to be able to take action, I think, with this information as quickly as possible and to the most granular level possible. And we've been able to do that, is understand down to the tactic and placement level, what should we be buying differently in order to improve our ROI? And then ultimately, how do we consider measuring and allocating across lifestyle and in market? And I think this is going to be a challenge that the industry is going to have to really take a strong look at, especially as it relates to budgeting, because in the end, we have various goals, and those various goals are to not only improve the amount of click-throughs and leads that we're generating, but to improve the brand image and the brand consideration within the consumer set. And so focusing our efforts on prioritizing that KPI set and then being able to optimize on the fly is going to require us to be a little bit more flexible, I think, in the future on where we're allocating budgets and being able to make those decisions.
Right. And so I thought it makes sense to show a few slides or screenshots of how we take that insight and provide that as actionable things that our clients can take advantage to actually improve marketing performance. So, one thing we see very commonly across our clients is when using multi-touch attribution to accurately figure out when people see a stream of online media, what aspects of that media are actually driving people to convert. What we find is that certain parts of the campaigns perform very differently than what you thought was driving credit from last event. And this is a slide that shows a simple comparison that we typically do against last click. The lighter blue bars for these different channels, display, aggregator, which is basically affiliate, paid search, video, other channels. The light blue is the amount of credit our attribution methodology is allocating based on our multi-touch cross-channel approach. And the dark blue line is what the ad server or last event attribution is showing. You can show significant differences. The kind of green and red bars to the right kind of highlight that, which is many cases, and for this specific client, display obviously deserves and is getting a lot more credit under multi-touch attribution than display. And that typically makes a lot of sense because display is driving top of the funnel awareness, and using last event attribution tends to get short shrift relative to other conversion mechanisms. And you can see the aggregator channel or affiliate channel for this client tends to get a lot less credit using multi-touch attribution than what the client thought using last event. And again, that tends to make sense. Affiliate clicks tend to be very bottom of the funnel when someone's ready to convert. They might go out looking for a coupon or an offer. It's very bottom of the funnel activity. And obviously, while that's still important in driving a conversion, it doesn't deserve all the credit. Another thing we tend to look at is what we call funnel analysis. So this is showing for, I think this is for kind of search and affiliate parts of a client's site. How much of the credit that was allocated was as an introducer, in other words, the first touch point that drove any sort of tangible credit towards conversion, promoter, so touch points in the middle, and then closer, the last event. And what you can see here is that this media had a lot of impact on closing the sale, because this is a bunch of search and affiliate type media elements. If we were to look at it for display, we'd see typically the opposite. We'd actually see a whole variance of certain parts of your display campaign are getting tangible credit, but they're driving that credit at the top of the funnel versus the middle of the funnel versus the bottom of the funnel. And this is the type of analysis that allows our clients like Initiative to build better campaigns. So find parts of your media campaign that are tangibly driving awareness that ultimately drives into conversion, and spend more of your top of the funnel dollars there, and then know what parts of your campaign are actually driving people to actually convert, and it starts to impact the creative you're doing within that as well. So the parts of your campaign that are more driving people to actually close, you're going to have more offer-related creative, and the media elements that are tangibly driving people, introducing people to the brand so that they'll ultimately convert, you may want more brand-oriented creative. And so a lot of aspects in how you can leverage this insight to improve your planning, a lot of things that Will talked about. Quick case study. This is for a financial services client. So a relatively small client that we worked with. We kept budget the same. We actually have two components to our service. So a lot of what we've talked about is using attribution for media planning. Plan every quarter for your next campaign. There's another thing Will talked about, which is how do you use attribution or an attribution service to help you with in-flight optimization, which is the weekly cadence you get into with your clients or as marketers to kind of review your current campaign and tweak results to maximize performance. We have a separate layer of optimization technology, and the results from that can tend to be really quite dramatic. And so for this client, leveraging our optimization technology, we'll provide recommendations based on the constraints of how much money clients can move across campaigns, channels, sites, specific placement level, keyword level recommendations, and the impact that has on ultimate conversion. And for this client, we were able within a few short months to drive a 19% increase in conversions and drop their effective CPA by 27%. And this last slide kind of shows that when we started efforts with this client last year, the red line represents their eCPA, how that went down. You can see how their total conversions went up. This again, is just from the benefit of in-flight optimization, the weekly process, again, or monthly process you might go through with your clients to improve in-flight performance. And so attribution can drive very tangible, real results. Essentially how I look at it is we're providing marketers with clarity of insight of what's really happening with their campaigns. And when you have that clarity of insight, marketers are able to plan better campaigns, execute better campaigns, and therefore drive better results for customers.
Absolutely.
So I think, are we good on time? Yeah, we're great. I think we're ready for questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. We actually have a couple of questions from the audience. Can you hear me? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we have a couple of questions from the audience. Thank you guys for this presentation. The first question I have is, how is your data digested down so that someone can actually take an action on it? And how do you handle delivering it in a way that is usable and efficient?
Want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
So it's a great question. There's a lot of data. With Initiative, we're working with billions and billions of touch points and media elements every month. And so how do you make sense of that data? So we're obviously calculating attribution at its most granular level. But one way that we help our clients make sense out of that is we're able to roll that data up under the same kind of campaign structure that the client already has. So, Will, with his client, they have certain campaigns, certain creatives that they're using, certain sites, certain placements. That all rolls up into a campaign in their ad server and in their search platform. And we're able to roll the results up the same way so that we can provide the same roll-up so that Will can look at the data the same way. It's just infused with more accurate attribution insights. And then the other thing we add is certain reports like that introducer, promoter, closer, which is just looking at the data from different slices to take into account kind of the path or the path that clients or customers go through when they convert. And then we rely on our clients a lot. So we'll come back and say, boy, I really want to look at the data this way. Can we create a custom report to do that? So we do that as well. But that's probably the biggest challenge, which is how do you make sense of the data?
Well, thank you.
Build an interface to do that.
Thank you. And so on average, how many touch points are you seeing across the full life cycle of the purchase path?
Wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
We have one part of our platform that we call the stacking report. And it just shows for all the conversions, how many different paths did people take to convert. And of course, you'll see the path of one search click. That's all we saw in the data. User came in, clicked on a paid search click, and converted. Then we'll see a display impression and a search click. And then we'll see 3 display impressions and a search click. Now, we'll sort that, and for most clients, we'll find that maybe the top, when we look at it by channel, the top kind of 20 paths will account for maybe 60 to 80% of total conversions. But we'll also see the long tail, where, especially if a client's doing a lot of remarketing, where we'll see literally hundreds and hundreds of touch points before a conversion happens. So frankly, that does present opportunity to gain efficiencies. A lot of times those long tail, many multi-touch conversions can be streamlined a bit, save some money and reallocate elsewhere, because a last event attribution tends to reinforce some of those remarketing campaigns where you're marketing at actually a higher frequency than you need to.
And what about abandoned customers? Can you account for their path as well?
What customers?
The ones that are, that you're losing along the path. The ones that
abandoned customers.
Yeah. Sorry, it's my French.
Yeah. So, what we can tend to see, we kind of look at it a different way, which is we look at what's the conversion rate. And so a lot of times we'll see with these different paths that the almost exponential impact that additional touch points might have in conversion. So we might see that just a search click will convert at a 7 or 8% rate for a client. We'll see that if the client, if that visitor sees, visitors that see a display impression and then a search click will convert at a 15% rate. And so that lift is really kind of, it's different than how customers abandon. It's more how can you increase the overall conversion rate by having multiple touch points. And you find that right balance where, and then you'll find the cases where someone sees 300 display ads and a search click, and the conversion rate won't be much different from someone that saw 4 or 5 display ads, right? So it's really more how do you find the most efficient path to conversion, so you can spend more money in the right spots.
I think to that end, I think seeing the handoff between the mid-funnel and the lower funnel, where lifestyle placements are interacting with the lower funnel endemic shopping sites, we're actually kind of navigating the user to the end goal, which is to perform the actions on the company website and really take notice of the vehicles.
Yeah, I find a lot of times advertisers, clients in their gut know that top of the funnel brand-oriented media campaigns or campaigns in the overall media plan for a client, in their gut they know it works, but they've had to rely on alternative metrics to prove it. We can now actually really definitively show how those campaigns are actually driving conversions. So you don't have to rely exclusively on brand lift studies, or you don't have to rely on a different set of metrics for your kind of lifestyle campaign, as Initiative calls it, versus your lower funnel, more direct response oriented campaign. So you can just look at it more holistically now.
Very good. Thank you. I have 2 questions about data integration. The first one is, how do you integrate with bidding platforms?
So that's a great question. We're in the midst of doing that. So there's 2 aspects to our service. One, we want to make sure that our insight is actionable, that we can provide very specific recommendations that a client can take advantage of to improve results. The other aspect, though, is you want to make sure that we can provide insight that's scalable, which is, if we give Will 3,000 changes to make to his media campaign every week, that's not scalable. They can't implement that. And so one way that we've been doing that is through the RTB side with various bidding platforms. With Initiative, it's through their trading desk at Cadreon. And what we can do is we can actually drive, many of the trading desks and their DSP platforms have open APIs where they want to ingest data to help improve their bidding algorithms. And so instead of us recreating the wheel and trying to redo the bidding algorithms that the DSPs do very, very well, we just want to be able to feed our attribution insights so that the bidding platform can use attributable conversion insights on a fractional attribution basis versus last event. And they can just do everything they do really well from a bidding standpoint based on our insights. It's almost like an Intel Inside approach. And that really helps drive results. And that's really scalable for Will's team because then the bidding engine and the trading desk does what it does well. It just does it with better data.
Okay, thank you. Well, same question about TV data. Can you integrate some set-top box data into your work?
I'll start, and I know Will, they've been doing, Initiative's doing a lot of great work with Rentrack and with other folks around TV data. So we tend to look at TV data. There's no doubt TV data obviously plays a role within conversions and online conversions. The way we look at it is we want to understand the halo effect that TV has on online conversions. And so if you have a client that spends nothing on TV, and I know this isn't relative for the automotive space, they're spending tons of money on TV, but illustrative example, you spend no money on TV in Q1 and then a lot of money in Q2, online results are obviously going to go up in Q2 because the TV has an impact. And so if we can ingest that automotive data down to whatever, that aggregate TV data, to whatever specific level, down to the DMA, time of day, type of creative, all that kind of stuff, we can use that data to make sure that our online conversion results are as accurate as possible. And we're also doing some early work with Initiative looking at how we can leverage TV data to actually understand how to attribute credit across offline and online media.
Yeah, it falls very much in line with some of the work that we're doing from an econometric modeling standpoint, understanding, across channel how much to allocate across those channels. But then this is a tool that we think we can leverage to adjust digital to really be most responsive within channel to the other elements that are actually they need the credit. They deserve the credit that they're getting.
And media mix optimization is usually the econometric modeling is the top-down. How do you allocate budget? How much money do you allocate to TV versus digital versus your other channels? We'll then come in and complement that by, once that budget's set, we can help really improve performance, mainly on the digital spend, but we're finding opportunities to do that as well. So it's really coming at it top-down and bottoms-up. We tend to come at it bottoms-up.
So can I ask you maybe to go a little bit deeper and explain to us how many impressions are required to make sure that all that works? I mean, is there a minimum that you need?
Well, yeah, I like to joke that if you have an advertiser, it's usually not a problem in the automotive space because the volume of media is so large. But if you have an advertiser that is doing a small volume of media and almost everyone converts after seeing one touch point, multi-touch cross-channel attribution is last event attribution. If a person sees one ad and converts, there's nothing to fractionally allocate credit against. So you have to have, attribution works best when users are seeing a stream of media and you want to understand how to allocate credit across that stream. And that obviously works very well in automotive because you have very long consideration cycles and you have a lot of media being bought because digital is such an important channel and digital and the internet is such an integral way of how people research and decide what car they want to buy. That it really is a confluence. In fact, that's why attribution works so well in automotive. But typically, as a rule of thumb, we like to see advertisers doing about 50 million display impressions, a comparable spend amount in search. And what we'll first look at when we work with the client is we'll look at the data and see what share of conversions have multi-touch, how many conversions have multi-touches. If we work with a client and have very few number of multi-touch conversions, then it's not going to make a lot of sense to use attribution.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we're running a little bit out of time, but the last question I want to ask you is, we have a Facebook page. Can you measure the influence that all of this has on conversion? Is there any way you can trace or correlate those things?
So there's two challenges with social media. One is how do you track paid media? Facebook, in certain regards, is a walled garden. So it's hard to get that data to understand how that works with the other paid channels. We have an implementation where we can put a tag in the Facebook creative if you're a marketplace advertiser, which means you work with your agency, you're not self-serve. That allows us to look at Facebook media, for example, like we would any other display part of your campaign. So we can understand how Facebook is, accurately allocate credit on an attribution model. So we've got the paid side nailed. The more interesting side is on the earned and owned side, which is how people are interacting with your brand, talking about your brand. And so we're just starting efforts at figuring out how we can bring that insight in. I think that the thing that's interesting is a lot of the listening services out there that many companies are signing up to use, they really kind of drop the ball. Their whole emphasis is just to give you an idea of what's the volume of folks talking about your brands. And they kind of end there. They don't really tie it back to how does that volume of Twitter, of tweets and Facebook posts and Facebook likes, how does that ultimately drive people to either positively buy your brand or your product or not? And I think that's the loop I think that folks are looking to try to close, which will make it really, really interesting.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Big round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.